Me today. I was quite surprised, just like you are, to learn that this is streaming all over the place. So I'm thrilled, but I'm also a little hesitant, but we'll see how that goes. My name is Richard Ehlert, and I am the Procurement Director at the Texas Facilities Commission here in Austin. My agency is one of, 350 or so state agencies. We are a strategic agency in that we award construction and architectural and engineering contracts for construction for the state of Texas. We do not do Texas TxDOT stuff, which is highways, and we do not do prisons, which is TDCJ, but just about anything else we will build for the state of Texas. I oversee the award of about $350 million in appropriated funds, either directly to my agency or through one of our client agencies, such as HHSC or the General Land Office, etc., every biennium. So why am I up here talking to you today? Well, I have about 27 years experience in procurement, 17 of those in the semiconductor industry. I was a worldwide strategic sourcing specialist for Eaton Semiconductor. And then when I transitioned, they transitioned my fab out to Boston. I went to work for Cypress Semiconductor. And when they moved that out to San Jose, I went to work for the great state of Texas. Public service is a great obligation. I have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayer, which is myself, and to you. And today, I hope to take a lot of the mystery out of, well, what happens when I send my bid or my proposal into that government entity and I never hear from them again? Or what happened there? Or how did it happen and why did it happen? Today, I want to talk to you about how that does happen. Now, I'm going to be speaking a lot to state government. However, a lot of what I'm talking to today will definitely apply to municipal, which is city, county, as well as university business as well. It's public service. The rules are a lot the same throughout the industries. And the premise is that if you don't know what the rules are, how can you do well in the game? So we'll talk about how that happens today. Any questions so far? Okay, well, let's go. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what is a request for proposal, because again, there are certain solicitation types that you will need to know that in public service. They all have different rules and obligations. So again, if you don't know the rules, how can you do well in the competition? We're going to talk about RFP versus an IFB, which is an invitation for bid. What type of solicitation is an RFP, and then responding to those. Talking about the general structure of those solicitation documents in government entities, how they look. Then we're going to talk about the pre-proposal conference, whether they're mandatory or not. I'm going to tell you, you should always go. Even if you're not interested in going as a prime vendor or even as a subcontractor. In any of those instances, you should go. But even if you're not interested in either one of those and you're interested in doing work for the government, you should probably attend some of those. They're very educational. The purpose and structure of that meeting, and then talk about the evaluation process and the award process. Know that in government business, it's an open book. You can ask for an open records request of anything that goes on in government work. When it is released is another issue. So if you ask for some information in the middle of a solicitation that you're competing in, you're probably not going to be released that information. But after it's awarded, you are absolutely entitled to that information, and we'll talk about what you should do after you don't get that award for a debrief or whatever, so you can learn from going forward. So what is an RFP? An RFP is a request for proposal. It is one of several solicitation methods, which I'll just quickly list right now. There's RFP, request for proposal, IFB, invitation for bid, RFQ, request for qualifications, and an RFO, request for offer. Those are the four main types of solicitations in public works, and they all have different rules. Some are similar, some are not. Today we're going to talk mostly about RFPs and how you put those together, because again, when I tell you what an IFB is, they're pretty cut and dry. Who here has participated in a public works solicitation before? You can see about a third of the room. Who here has won an award through that? About half of that. So congratulations, you've traversed the morass of public government. And again, you're going to learn today that the key is to understand what the rules are and what you have to do to respond to be able to qualify. So an RFP is a request for proposal, is a written document inviting you, suppliers, to submit a formal proposal to provide goods or services or a combination of those to any ordering entity. An IFB is an invitation for bid. It's very different. That's also a written document inviting suppliers to submit a formal bid. And the difference between the two we'll just cover in just a moment, but they are different. An RFP is generally used for procuring services because there are more subjective components to the service and the evaluation. And a bid is typically used for procuring goods because that's pretty cut and dry. So what's the difference? Again, an RFP is a formal and competitive method of procurement whereby suppliers are requested to submit proposals in a format that allows the consideration of factors other than price in the additional evaluation process. An IFB is a formal solicitation of sealed bids. The supplier offering the best value and meeting minimum quals at the lowest price is awarded the contract. Typically, negotiation is not allowed in the bid situation, and in an RFP, there is negotiation and a BAFO. When I say bids are used typically for goods, I'll give you an example. If I'm going to order 800 cases of Diet Pepsi, well, Diet Pepsi has a part number for that, right? Well, it's part number X. If any one of you provide that, I can pretty well determine that the price that you provide is the same throughout the process if you're providing me the part number I'm asking for. There's really no subjectivity to it. I may put some additional minimum qualifications you have to meet on that, such as you got to be in business 5 years, you got to have the capability of delivering 800 cases a week. You prove to me that that is in your bid, then I'm going to award that bid at the lowest dollar price. Who here has heard the term best value? It's bandied about a lot in government, isn't it? Well, I'm about to show you that there's actually a definition for best value, believe it or not. Now, in an RFP where you're soliciting for goods and or services, there's more subjectivity because you can rarely define services to the nth degree. A great example is construction, software development. Again, we're giving the supplier leeway to propose how they're going to submit or deliver those services and at what price. So let's talk about what best value is. When I talk about the rules, you need to know a couple of things. And I apologize to the people on the internet, but this is the way it is. Okay, there's Texas Government Code, there's Texas Administrative Code, and there's City Municipal Code. In all of those codes are the rules that the game is played by. It starts with Government Code. And what is Government Code? Well, when the legislature, of course, they meet, well, how often? Once every 2 years for 140 fun-filled days, not counting a special session, which can only be 30 days, et cetera, et cetera. But when they finally pass a bill, it becomes some sort of code. It may be agriculture code, it may be alcoholic and beverage code. There are many of them. But procurement is housed under government code. And again, whether you're looking at administrative code, which is for state agencies, or municipal code for city, it all starts here with government code. And I will tell you that government code for procurement starts with 2155. And if you just go to a Google search window and type in Texas Government Code, this is what will come up. Texas Constitution and Statutes, you can do a search. You know, I've said it very often, you don't necessarily have to be brilliant to be in public service, but you do have to be brilliant at finding things because it is all out there, trust me. Government Code, you see 2155, General Rules, 56, Purchasing Methods, 57, Automated Information, 58, Miscellaneous, etc., goes down to about 2162. And those contain, if I were to drill down on those, you would find chapters that define how government is supposed to react or work in public solicitation. Going on to administrative code, shows you the morass of public service. You have government code. Well, government code is not written to the nth degree. It's kind of vague, but it's got a definition there. Administrative code is where agencies, such as my own, or the comptroller of public accounts, where the statewide procurement group is housed, they will write additional code that further defines how that is to work. And then you may have on top of that, if you're responding to a solicitation from the city, city code. And you'll be able to search in the city code for that procurement code. Why am I telling you this? Because almost all public solicitations, the very first sentence out of their mouth is in accordance with the provisions of either Texas government code or Texas municipal code or some other code. I told you, you have to know the rules to be able to play well. You can go up and look up some of these rules. A great example is Government Code 2254, which is for professional services. We're not going to cover that today. But that government code defines what exactly is a professional service, which is architect, engineer, some other certifications, but only about 11 of them. If it isn't one of those in government code, it is not a professional service. Government code goes on to further define that you cannot award a contract to a professional service provider based solely upon the money. You have to base it upon their qualifications. So you have to rank them, 1 through whatever their response is, and then you will start negotiation with number 1. This is what I mean about how the rules apply. I have had people call me up on the phone because I teach classes such as this. I also teach state of Texas classes for public purchasers, which city purchasers, county, and state all attend, university. I tell them that if any vendor calls you up and asks you a question such as, what is that government code? You need to answer it. I've had vendors call me up, hey, I have an agency asking me for my fee schedule, and it's for architecture. Is that allowed? Well, I tell them, actually, no, sir, it is not, but you probably need to contact the point of contact in your solicitation. That's more about the rules here. So that just shows you how you need to know the rules and where to find them. If it's not clear to you in the solicitation, trust me, there's a point of contact in every solicitation, and that is the point of contact. You should write in a question, and they will answer it in a public forum. So government code, administrative code, and municipal code. Okay. Let's talk about the differences between these two. Bids, again, sealed bid, awarded the lowest dollar as long as you meet minimum qualifications, really no subjectivity, and RFP, which does have subjectivity. Shorter time frame typically for an IFB, because when I get the bids in, I can surely tabulate that up on an Excel spreadsheet in a matter of minutes or an hour. With an RFP, it's a longer time frame because you have an evaluation team that evaluates the subjective criteria. More about that in a moment. IFBs are evaluated against the exact spec that you put forth, and RFPs are evaluated against whatever criteria is listed in the document. That's key. It's whatever criteria is listed in the document, and I'll have an example of that in a moment. In a public bid opening, you have to read all the names and the prices, and if you've been to any of those, that's happened. They have to do that. For an RFP, you typically only read the names, because if negotiation is allowed, you would be certainly giving our hand away if we just played poker with the cards facing outwards from the very beginning. What's odd about that is that 2 sessions ago, construction lobby got a bill passed that says for construction, I now have to not only read the names and the prices allowed at the appropriate step, but I also have to divulge the budget. Well, guess what most of the prices come in at now? So in an IFB, typically no negotiation is allowed. There are a couple of exceptions, such as an emergency, declared emergency, or if I only get 1 bid response, I am allowed to negotiate with you. But typically, you open it, you meet the minimum quals, low bid gets that award. For an RFP, again, a best and final offer and a negotiation is allowed. Again, best value is low bid, and best value is a combo of price and qualifications. I told you a while ago that there's an actual definition for best value. I didn't make that up. Let's just quickly look at that. It is under 2155. I hope this doesn't take forever. And it's 2155.074. And there's a couple of key codes right together there that I want you to see that will tell you a little bit about how your stuff's supposed to look. There it is, best value standard for purchase of goods or services. For a purchase of goods or services under this chapter, blah, 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 state agency that provide the best value, installation costs, life cycle costs, quality and reliability. But of course, before all of that, it says price and conformance to specs is most important. Value analysis is always performance over cost. If it doesn't perform, it doesn't matter what it costs, does it? It's not any good to me. So best value first and foremost is price and conformance to specs. And then any entity can include any of these other things. Now, you're probably thinking, well, gosh, it's a big mystery then. Well, look at the very next government code. It very clearly states there is a requirement to specify value factors in request for bids or proposals. It cannot be a secret. If you see a public works solicitation and it's a big secret about how you're going to be evaluated and the points are not allotted and you can't understand that, they're not following the law, government code. There is a requirement to specify what those are so that you know where the emphasis is on how the evaluation is going to take place. Make sense? Yes? Okay. Okay, sorry, let me just get through the screen. We'll go to the next. So, RFPs are used to procure services via a competitive sealed proposal or, same thing, RFP method of procurement. They are issued to find a supplier that can meet or exceed our needs. They allow the ordering entity and the vendor or supplier to work from the same set of rules, requirements, schedules, and info. They allow the ordering entity the opportunity to clarify requirements, negotiate with vendors, and request a BAFO, and they are solicited many ways. For government, there's the Electronic State Business Daily. If you just went and typed in ESBD Texas, you would come right up with the first link that would be, that is the marketplace for state of Texas agencies and universities. Many municipalities use it. However, the city of Austin does have their own website. But this is where state agencies and universities are required to post all solicitations that are going to result in an award of $25,000 or more. So you can imagine there's quite a bit on there. You can search by agency. You can search by a keyword. If you know your NIGP class and item code of what you're looking for, you can search that way. That's a great, great tool. For private companies, there's really no legal requirement to post these anywhere, but they often announce them in a paper or in some public forum on their website, and they will list them. Other places you can find RFPs would be, again, the ESBD, business industry journals. For federal government, there's a website called Federal BizOps, which you could go to. Again, newspapers, the Texas Register has it. And, of course, if you're a member of a trade or a contractor association, I know that every time we post something, we also send that information to them, and they go download it for their own members. But, again, anything on the ESBD, it is free. It's all posted out there for you to download. All the specs will be there. All of the requirements for you to respond will be there. So, responding to RFPs, I can tell you that they are time-consuming, and you'll see what I mean in a moment from an example, because there are many elements to put together. It's not just the money. That ordering entity wants to know all about your company, too. And I will tell you in a slide, we're going to clarify it in a moment, but just sending in a canned presentation of your company is never going to win you an award, because you need to tailor your response to what we're asking for. If you do decide to respond, understand the requirements, the evaluation criteria used to determine award, the structure, the scope, and the deliverables. In every one of these public solicitations, there's going to be something called a schedule of events. And in that schedule of events is going to give you the time frame for the solicitation and when they expect to give the award, and most importantly, when they expect you to start work. Right then and there is a decision-making factor for you as a vendor. Well, they want me to start 9/1. It's 8/1. There's no way I could get all that done, and I'm just not going to play. Schedule of events is important for you because, believe me, the ordering entity is going to hold your feet to the fire. A lot of people think the state is self-insured. The state has no insurance. We do not. We put the burden back on guess who? The vendor. So know your requirements before you start and jump in. You should write your proposals for the ordering entity. Know that only their opinion matters, but it can't be some wild, made-up scale or some uninterpretable, logical conclusion. But it is their opinion. Only their opinion will matter. But again, it's got to make some sense. Look at it from the ordering entity's point of view always. You should always, in your response, prove you can meet or exceed our needs. Consider your resources and look for language and anomalies that may affect your ability to provide the products or services within the time frame for the stated price. And again, know that the proposal will be viewed by many and will always, I say possibly, it is always subject to open records requests. So keep proprietary info to a minimum. Some entities will ask you for your financial statements. Well, you will probably need to return that if you want to be considered. Is that subject to open records? Yes, it is. However, you can certainly mark that proprietary, which means it will be subject to the Attorney General's opinion, whether it's released or not. Typically they are, but how many times have I gotten an open records request for another vendor's response for their financial information? I have never. Not to say it couldn't happen, but I have not ever seen one at my agency. Also, remember, your proposal will be viewed by many. Some of those evaluators are going to have 1 month of experience. Some of those evaluators may have 20 years of experience. So presenting your response in a logical progression and format structured just like here's the two things that this whole seminar can be boiled down to, in my opinion. One is answer the question that is put forth to you by the entity. Again, you respond with an organized, paginated table of contents that correspond to the sections of the solicitation. And the other thing is not only answer the question, but answer the question as to how your company best provides those goods or services. That's key. In our section, I'll give you an example in a moment, but in our structure, we don't just have experience in qualifications. It says relevant experience in qualifications. One mistake I see companies make all the time is that I might be looking for a 50,000 square foot building renovation, but yet they're going to highlight their DFW 2 million square foot renovation, which is not an office, or their hospital renovation that they know they did real well, again, which is not an office. Again, I'm looking for relevant experience. I want them to highlight this office space or the experience or the services that I'm exactly looking for. You can certainly put all those great projects afterwards or as secondary, but a lot of evaluators, they'll look at an airport at my agency and, well, we don't build airports. I don't know how that's too relevant. So again, relevant, and again, that will also determine what you respond to from the ordering entity. So answer the question and answer it as to how you best provide the goods or services. Okay, basic structure of a solicitation or an RFP. You'll have an introduction and a scope, which may give you background, but again, the first thing out of it should say in accordance with the provisions of Texas government, municipal code, whatever it is. There'll be a term, there'll be a section for the money, there'll be a definitions, you'll have the all-important statement of work, you'll have your schedule of events, proposal requirements, and your contract terms and conditions. Now this last one here is not typically anything you really have to worry about. I always recommend you review it because like in state contract terms and conditions, they're going to say things like, I don't care who you are, we're not indemnifying you. And I know all of us want to always be indemnified, but again, since the state of Texas has no insurance, the only people we will indemnify are physicians and in rare cases, lawyers. And we won't even indemnify a hospital because more than physicians work at a hospital, right? So be sure you look over those terms and conditions. But again, those are the typical sections of an RFP. So there's usually an introductory paragraph. Again, there's a link to the government code there. By the way, if any of you want this presentation, all you've got to do is email me. I have my cards up here, and you can certainly do that. I also have prepared spiel on how to do business with the state of Texas. I'd love to share that with you because we're a great partner, and we'd love to have your business. There'll be a broad description of the project and may include a background section. I do have an example here, and why don't we just fly through that real quick. Okay, I wonder if that's going to work. Oh, it does. Okay. So you'll usually have your title. That 303 number, there's all agency or city or county or university solicitations are going to have some sort of number like that. That's our identifying number internally. That's usually what we post with. We'll have a date that is posted and when it's due and when the opening date is. You'll have your table of contents. And at the beginning, what does it say? Pursuant to the provisions of Texas Government Code. You could go look that up right now, etc. Now, this is a template for my agency, so where it's yellow, it can certainly change from program to program. There'll be a broad description right there at the beginning. You'll have your term. You'll know that we expect to start on the date of execution and will expire on August 31st, XX. There's two-year renewal periods. Again, that's what you want to look for in the term section, is how long is this possible contract for. There'll be a definition section. Now, there is always a minority business or hub program at public entities, and they all have different requirements and sometimes different sign-up lists and different provisions. So know that the state requires a hub subcontracting plan for you as a prime vendor respondent to document your outreach to hubs for your subcontracting. That's required at $100,000 and above for all state agency contracts. And for city, it can be any amount that they stipulate. I also want to tell you that in the state program for hub, we are required by law to give opportunity to hubs. You are not allowed to be given preference or points for being a hub. That's a big myth. State government, the government code is written that we are provided to give the opportunity. Now, there are hub goals for every contract, and there are benefits for a prime vendor meeting those goals for hubs in not having to do a lot of good faith effort outreach if you meet them. So there are benefits. But know that in state government, there is no requirement to be a hub, and there is no requirement that you be a hub to be awarded, and you cannot get extra points for being a hub. That is not always so in municipal and some university solicitations. So again, knowing the rules is important for you. So there'll be a definition section. Here's an all-important schedule of events. Again, it'll say when we issued it, oh look, there's a pre-proposal conference. I always, always, always recommend you go to those. We'll talk about those. You get to meet the key players. You get to see who your competition is. You get to hear, you may do a walkthrough of the site. You'll get an explanation by the project manager, and it shows the ordering entity that you are interested. Sometimes they are mandatory. They are always mandatory at my agency. Therefore, I always schedule 2 to be fair for competition. But know that when they are, and I suggest you go. There's always a deadline for you to submit questions. Why do you think that is? Yes, sir? Okay, are you ready? It's a long one. Richard dot Ehlert at TFC, that's Tom Frank Charlie, dot state, STATE, dot TX, dot US. One more time. Richard dot Ehlert at TFC .state.tx.us. Okay? All right, good to go. There's always a deadline for submission of questions because, again, you're not allowed to just call up the purchaser and say, oh, I got a question. Well, if you do and they answer, you're really breaking code. Because although you may think that things are done secretly behind closed doors and we awarded the people we like, this is an open, transparent, and honest process. There's a single point of contact because we only want one person funneling questions, and then that purchaser will funnel those questions to the end user, We will all agree on an answer, and then that purchaser will post those questions and answers in a public forum for anyone and everyone to view. There's a deadline because it wouldn't do you as a vendor much good to ask a question right up to the day before your bid or your RFP is due. So they're always about a week out from the due date so that we can get all the answers, put them out there, and you can digest those answers and give us a reasonable proposal. Because there could be questions about the specs, there could be, unclear specifications on drawings or in the spec, etc. That's your forum as a vendor, is to write that question into that single point of contact. Then there's a deadline for your submission of your proposal, expected award date, and expected contract start date. The next section, proposal requirements, is all important for you as a vendor. This tells you what I want to see from you in your response and what I'm going to evaluate you on. Remember that government code, 2155.075, requirement to specify value factors in request for bids or proposals. That's what these are. I'm telling you how many originals I want and how many copies I want, whether I want it on a CD. By the way, know that you are always responsible for all your costs for these, and don't think that we know that sometimes these cost you thousands of dollars to put together from your time and effort. We'll tell you a little bit about public information. The next section is contents. First section I want from you is company information. How many points is it worth to me? Nothing, but I need this information from you. I'm telling you what I need. The next section is relevant, experience, and qualifications, and it is worth 20 out of 100 points. Requirement to specify value factors. Next section is methodology, etc. That's worth 15 out of 100 points. The money. I, as a public servant and a fiduciary responsibility, feel like the emphasis in public works should be on the money. So we put 60 points for the money and 40 points as a total for all the other subjective criteria at my and most state agencies. Next section is QA and QC and safety. It's 5 out of 100 points, and I tell you exactly what I need to see from you. There may be a hub subcontracting plan. I may need references. There's an execution of proposal. There's the bid bond. Maybe there's a bid bond, and there's a section on how to submit inquiries, how to submit your proposal, how to deliver it, what will happen at the opening. In Section 9, how I'm going to evaluate you and award you, and I'm listing the criteria again for you right here. And then I go on to tell you that a committee will be established to evaluate them. We also may do an interview, in which case at my agency, I'm telling you right here, scoring of the interview may replace all of the scoring of your initial submittal. Again, I'm telling you how we're going to evaluate you. And then there's the end of it. Attachment A was the contract, which had the statement of work in it. Attachment B is our hub plan. Now, attachment C, I'm calling it my execution of proposal. On a bid, it will be your bid signature or signature of your bid. Folks, it is all critical that you sign this. If you do not sign your bid form or you do not sign your execution of proposal form, no government entity will typically take it. That is because for the state to accept your bid or your proposal or your offer, all I really have to do is issue a PO. The mutuality of acceptance is your signature on the bid form or the proposal form and my signature on a PO. We have a contract. In a lot of cases, there may be an additional formal contract on top of a PO, but know that all I have to do to accept your offer, your bid, your proposal, is issue a PO, which is all critical that you know what you're doing when you submit, you stand by it, and that's what your signature says. If there's technically no offer on the table, meaning no signature, I cannot entertain that offer. And it would not be fair to anybody else if I allowed someone else to send it in afterwards and nobody else. So know that there are some drop-dead documents in an RFP situation, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. Okay, so there's your execution of proposal form. There is the all-important signature, and of course I think you saw it said at the top. Note, this attachment must be signed with the submittal. Submittals which do not include this attachment shall be disqualified, etc. And I have had vendors not remember to sign this, even though we stress it. It is painful, trust me, to be able to have to call you up and know that you spent 4 weeks and who knows how much money putting this together, and now because you simply forgot to sign it, I can't entertain it. It is a hard, cold fact. Don't forget to sign it. Okay, attachment D, again, any attachments that you may have. And then for my solicitations, and really a lot of them now, we have a checklist. And it's the same checklist that my purchaser uses to check your submittal in. It's a great checklist for you to make sure that you've included everything I need to see from you. So that is what the basic structure of an RFP looks like. Any questions right now? Okay, great. Let's go back to the presentation. And yes, I'm going to step it up here.
Actually, we have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah, we have a question. Jaden, unmute your friend. Go for it. Unmute.
Question?
Yes. Just a second. Jaden, you can unmute. There you go.
Oh, yes. My question is, does the PO agreement differ from state to state, or it's similar, or it's the same in every state?
Was the question, does the process I'm describing vary from state to state?
Or is it the same, regardless of what state of the union?
The basic premise of what I'm telling you today is the same. Open, transparent, honesty, has to be accountable. They have to tell you what they're going to evaluate you on, but it can vary from state to state. The key is to make sure you read the document and you understand what the rules are.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, sir. Well, that was interesting.
We have another question actually from the audience.
Okay.
One of our viewers is asking, can they submit a proposal? JD is asking, can she submit a proposal even though she is not a Texas resident? Does it matter that I'm an individual and not a company?
That's a very good question. Texas does have what are called preferences. Preferences are typically used to break tie bids. A proposal, again, is not a bid. You can have a lot of ties in bids where the money, if you're going to submit a bid for 800 cases of Diet Pepsi, it very well could be that several people submit the exact same price. One of the preferences listed for bids is Texas resident bidder. But again, the preference is used when all things being equal, you would use a preference. If one person has checked a preference and another has not, then the person who checks the preference gets the bid. If they both check the preference, believe it or not, it's left up to Lady Luck. And it's not done with a flip of a coin. It's done with lots, put in a hat, with 3 witnesses. It's very official. Going back to a proposal, there are very few times that a proposal's everything is all things being equal because you have subjectivity in it. So preferences are not used so much in proposals. Does that answer the question? Okay, great. Let's go on. We're short on time. Oh, individuals versus businesses? No, what's going to count is the experience and qualifications. If you're, as an individual, you have the best relevant experience and qualifications, you should be evaluated as such. Okay.
Thank you.
So, I just talked about the proposal form that has to be signed. You notice it said must be and shall be. This is also the way code is written. When it's written with must and shall, that means you must do it exactly as described. When it's may and can, you can propose alternate methods of delivery. So know that those are keywords you should look for in a proposal. We talked about the statement of work. It typically gives you quite a bit of flexibility when writing your response, and you have an opportunity here to convince the ordering entity that your delivery of services will be the best value. In the statement of work, know that you're going to have to put together a team of people to respond, probably. You've got your salespeople, your techs, people who go out and do your pricing. Know that you will probably have to have a team because it's very rare that one individual is talented enough to put together all the stuff you just saw that we require in a proposal and go out and get all the pricing done. So know that you probably need to have a team. Discussing the RFP and the statement of work and questions with the ordering entity, again, there will always be instructions in there as a single point of contact. As a matter of fact, at my agency, I have it in my solicitation that if you, as a vendor, contact anybody else during the solicitation at my agency about the solicitation, we probably will not accept your bid or proposal because you're not following the rules. Everybody must be put on an even and open forum. So it wouldn't be fair for me to answer your question on the phone and then not your question in writing. Consequently, if you go to a pre-proposal conference, I always recommend, and I've actually stopped entertaining technical questions at my pre-proposal conferences because I am not technical and I do not want to orally interpret a technical question. Always cover yourself and submit that question in writing and get an answer in writing. Don't ask it orally because then it'll be like, well, I don't remember saying that. Get it in writing. So always single point of contact will be the purchaser. In your response, you may be ready to suggest alternatives. Please make sure all your questions are answered before you complete your proposal. And typically when we issue addenda, we're going to want to know that you've read them all. So in the solicitation, it'll probably ask for you to acknowledge that you have read addendums 1, 2, or 3, or however many there are. If I had 8 addendums during a solicitation and you didn't respond but with 2 of them, I would wonder really how much you knew about the solicitation. Now, would that be a reason for me to reject you? No. I'm going to call you up and say, hey, there were 8 addendums. Did you read all 8? Yeah. Well, you only returned 2. Sign numbers 3 through 8 and send those to me today so that they're on file, so that you acknowledge that you have read them all. So when you're giving a response, here's a very easy example of a requirement and then a bad response and a detailed response. The requirement is the building should be readily accessible by people with disabilities. Well, I've seen companies just say, yep, our building's accessible. We're good to go. No, tell me it's located on the main bus route, the front door next to the stop. Tell me what is accessible about the building from my requirement. Again, how best your company can provide the goods or services. I think you'll agree response B is going to get a much better score than response A. We talked about these things here. Know that financial information can be marked proprietary, but again, you need to limit what you mark as proprietary. References are always subjective, but know that if you're putting down references in a requirement, be sure you tell those references that you've put them down as a reference. Because if I make 3 phone calls and still don't get a call back, I'm giving up on that reference. Life goes on. Again, an organized, paginated table of contents. If one of my sections was relevant experience and qualifications, one of your responses should be titled Relevant Experience and Qualifications. So again, the evaluators can easily find your information. I've had vendors submit a proposal and they put their stuff out of order and it's not easily located. It has to be easily located because people are human. If it's not easily found, it may not be seen. Again, write your proposal in the same format. Keep your language simple. Respond to every requirement. I have people sometimes send in like a CD of their company and stuff like that. It's probably not going to be looked at, folks. Save that for the interview. Only send in what's asked for in the initial response. Because again, if it's not asked for, it wouldn't be fair for it to be reviewed from everybody else who submitted. They're only going to look at what is asked for. Ensure all your signatures and attachments are included. Submit your proposal on time. I think you all know that they usually say no bid or proposal will be accepted under any circumstances after this date or time. Well, I can tell you, my agency says we may not accept them. I know you're thinking, what? Well, if it's a proposal and we only read out the names and you're 5 minutes late and we haven't started opening those yet, I may accept your proposal late. It's reasonable and customary. But if it's a bid and I've started opening those bids and you're 5 minutes late, we will not accept your bid. So no, every agency may be different. I tend to do what's reasonable and customary and what's fair and open to all competition. But again, most agencies say under any circumstance. What I always tell my purchasing class is, well, if you put that down and you've had something out for 6 weeks and you only get 1 response and they're 3 minutes late, isn't that any circumstance? Is your end user going to be unhappy with you? Absolutely. So, again, what is prudent and honest and open? Every RFP requires specific critical documentation. Exclusion of that generally results in disqual, meaning no one sees your proposal and is not evaluated or reviewed, period, no matter what your price is. or what your experience is. Common drop-dead documents are, we talked about the signing the bid form or the execution of proposal. If there's a non-collusion affidavit, they are typically notarized and are required. A bid bond will absolutely be a drop-dead document. Wouldn't be fair for you to go out and spend $6,000 on a bid bond and somebody else not do that, and I look at their proposal or bid. Not going to happen. And again, if there's a hub plan or some minority work that has to be done outreach, if it ain't in there, folks, it's going to be thrown out. Period. We just talked about these certain things, what they are. Talked about the PPC. Again, it's to review the RFP. The purchaser is going to run that meeting, and they're going to go through that document we just looked at a while ago. They're going to explain what we need from you and why we need it and how it's supposed to look. You're also going to see your competition there. And if you have a hub plan, you will probably see some subcontractors there that are hubs that you can network with. Again, it may be mandatory, and that's typically to make sure we have the right amount of competition. And in general, at this conference, the ordering entity will describe their goals and objectives, provide instructions about the solicitation document and the process, and sometimes answer potential respondents' questions. You'll have an introduction. You're going to get to meet the purchaser, the hub coordinator. You'll get to meet the end user. You probably won't get their business card, as well you should not have their business card at this time. Should only have the purchaser's business card. What are the objectives? They'll talk about how the RFP is structured, the requirements, the schedule of how things are going to happen, eval and award process, and some Q&A. You should attend, again, for all these reasons we already talked about. You'll meet the technical players. You'll have a better understanding of the document. You'll have an idea of primes and subs. There'll be a POC for submitting questions. And again, I always recommend to you that you never get a question answered orally. For your own protection, submit it in writing and get it in writing. Because if it isn't in writing, the state and the city and the county and universities probably typically think it doesn't exist. Okay, the opening. You'll have a submittal process. You saw in my document and where to submit your documents and how. Late proposals are generally not accepted. At a public opening for RFPs, only the names of respondents are read aloud, and no other information is released until after award. Because we're going to evaluate, we may interview, and as a matter of fact, when you do a BAFO, government code says that BAFO is best and final offer, that I can only ask you for a BAFO if none of you know your standing in relation to one another in the evaluation. So it is not allowed to divulge by law what your standing or your evaluation ranking is during the process. Know that open records laws applies to all public sector. It requires disclosure of all non-proprietary information determined by the OAG. And again, you can certainly ask for that tabulation after it's all over, either through the agencies or the entity's public records information website or through the purchaser. Hey, I want to know the tabulation of that. Well, you have a right to get it. If you're not getting a phone call back from that purchaser, then you should go back to the website and find the open records thing and submit it that way. Trust me, it will be answered. By law, we have 10 days to get back to you once you submit an open records request. Now, that's not 10 days to give you the answer. It's 10 days to tell you, yeah, here it is, we can get it to you, or it's going to cost you this much. Typically, unless you're asking for volumes of information, entities don't charge you, and typically you can get that information within 10 days. But the law says we have to get back to you within 10 days and tell you the status of your open records request. You had a question?
Yeah, if you are a hub vendor, do you also need to have some kind of plan in there?
Good question. The question is, if you are a hub vendor responding to a public solicitation and there's a hub subcontracting plan in there, do you have to fill that, do that process? Absolutely. If you're responding as the prime vendor, even though you're a hub, it is for your hub subcontracting. And you are required, even though you're a hub, to do outreach to hubs in your subcontracting efforts. Okay? So yes, always. Okay. Proposals are generally evaluated on those things. We've already talked about those. We talked about best value, 2155.074. We talked about 2155.075. And know that those are other government codes that are listed because other agencies also have their own government code, and know that they may have other procurement requirements within their own government code. Getting complex, isn't it? But again, they should tell you what those codes are so you can go read them and understand what they're evaluating you against. Okay, why don't we look at an example of a tabulation, just to show you how the 60-40 split may work. Oh, Lord. I guess I'll do a complicated one. Okay, so again, at the RFP opening, or when you submit an RFP for most typical solicitations, the names are the only divulged information, because again, we're going to evaluate the subjective criteria, we're going to add the money criteria to that, we're going to come up with a ranking, we may interview, we may evaluate, we may negotiate. So only the names are listed. So that's what we have right there. Now, I did mention that construction is different now. This was done before that. So if this was construction now, I would also have to put the pricing down there. So this one, the very first step is an evaluation of their qualifications. Of course, you know, we explained in the solicitation, this is the way we're going to do it. We're first going to qualify people, and then we're going to ask the most qualified only for the money. So here on the left, relevant experience in qual, methodology, there's the points, and you can see what each evaluator gave them. Now, since this is subjective criteria, my duty as a purchaser is after I tabulate this up, I have to go, one, make sure there are no mistakes, of course, but two, I have to make sure that those evaluators' scores are in an acceptable range of subjectivity. Meaning 3 out of 4 can't be between a 35 and a 40 and one of them have a 3. If I see that on there, I'm going to go ask that evaluator, hey, you gave this person a score that is not in line with all the other evaluators. We don't tell them what that is. Please review this section again, and you're allowed to change it if you made a mistake or you missed something. That's my job, to make sure, again, that people aren't weighting something unfairly or unequally. So here they've done their evaluations. We've come up with a 92.3, a 93.3, a 71, and a 93.67. Out of those scores for qualifications, who do you think I asked for money? People for the money. I did not ask Mr. 71 for the money. Now I've asked for the money. I've converted those 100 points for qualifications now to 40 because I have 60 points for pricing. Here's the way the pricing works in government solicitations for this. The person with the lowest price gets the full range of pricing. If the next person is 10% higher, then they're going to get 10% off of that price range. In the case of 60, they're going to get a 54. If they're 50% higher than the lowest price, then what are they going to get? A 30. And if they're 100% higher than the lowest price, they get a big fat goose egg for pricing. That's the way that works. It's a mathematical formula, which is right there in the formula bar. That's exactly what that formula says. So based upon the pricing, you can see the lowest price is $1,005,224, and I believe that is the person that got all 60 points, and then the other points are just mathematically computed. That's the money. There's no subjectivity in that, is there? It's a mathematical formula. There's no subjectivity. Then it's those points for pricing are added to their average for qualifications to come up with a final ranking. And I have a 96.3, I have a 95.1, and I have an 82.7. Poor Mr. J.E. Dunn, he's only got bad points because he's so much higher than anybody else. So now I've seen, not only is the person, Balfour Beatty, not only are they the lowest price, but they are almost the most qualified. Very close to a 36.9 to a 37.4. I would consider that equally qualified, in my opinion. That is an example of a typical tabulation. Yes, sir.
So when you say that the RFP process is really subjective, and there are different processes which can be adopted or used to
evaluate,
deliver the product or deliver the services, the price might be dependent on the service. Like the same software can be developed in Java or could be developed in PHP, and if you've not said which is which, then
yes. Let me repeat your question. The question is that in a situation where you may be able to provide a wide range of service delivery methods, and the price can vary drastically, that, yes, your answer, that will have an impact on your evaluation mathematically. So you have to determine whether that's the right situation for you. Plus, you don't know what all the other people are proposing on their price till it's over. So, you know, throw your best shot in. I'm going to ask you to be very competitive in your pricing with government entities because we're spending taxpayer monies. You know, I'd love to have a Bugatti Veyron for the state, but I probably don't need one, do I? I don't think you'd resent somebody driving around in the state in a Bugatti Veyron. It's a $2 million car. Probably a Ford Taurus from surplus will work just fine. So this is an example of a tabulation. So now let me explain a little bit about what happens in that evaluation. Some of you are like, well, how does that work? How does that mystery happen? Well, when those proposals are turned in, again, if it's a bid, we're going to read out the names of the prices, and you can attend that. You'll probably know within 10 minutes who's going to win that bid. In a proposal, we're only going to read out the names. You're going to leave. The purchaser is now going to go back and use that RFP checklist to make sure that you've submitted everything we need to evaluate you on. The next step he's going to do is he's going to remove the hub subcontracting plan so that the hub director can evaluate that because you can fail on that plan. That's being evaluated. The purchaser is also going to remove the pricing from all of the copies that are submitted. You may or may not know this, but the evaluators, when they're evaluating your subjective criteria, they have no idea what your pricing is. I believe that will probably influence an evaluator's judgment. If they have a $2 million budget and one vendor came in and they're super qualified at $2,200,000 and another vendor who's mediocrely qualified came in at $1,800,000, that might impair his judgment on the qualifications, which is unfair to the qualified vendor. That's what best value is, folks. It's a combination of that subjective and that math for a best value purchase. And as you can see, we didn't get the absolute most qualified, did we? But we got a really qualified vendor at the lowest price there. I have awarded to vendors who were not the lowest price by almost $1 million because qualifications did not bring them up to the top of the score. Best value says that you were not qualified enough to do that at that price. So the pricing is removed, the hub plan is being evaluated, the purchaser is doing this right there on a spreadsheet and doing the math, and when the evaluators come to the evaluation room, they have to sign what's called a non-disclosure form and an eval team brief, which is an affidavit that says several things. First, it says that they are acting on their own behalf and not acting with any promise of gift, gratuity, I'm not related to anybody, I agree not to talk about this with anybody else. It's all very open and transparent. So again, they have to sign this form, they have to further disclose they have no knowledge of any of the pricing of the offers, and then we tell them the rules. They have to sign this form, they are to evaluate and score each submittal independently and impartially. I know a lot of you think, well, they read all through them and they pick the best one. That is not how it's done. Remember, solicitations are evaluated against the criteria specified in the document. Well, that's how we have to evaluate them. So, Olympic diving is a great example. In Olympic diving, do they trot all 10 of those people out and they all do their dives and then all the judges sit back and they decide who's going to, get the best score? No. The diver dives. The judges have a set of criteria. They evaluate that person on that criteria and they give them a score right then and there, don't they? That's the same way these are evaluated. Independently and impartially, not against one another, but against the criteria specified in the document. They're allowed to ask questions, but they're not allowed to say, well, yeah, that answer's on page 47, but it's a bunch of BS. Not allowed to do that. Know that some of these evaluations are often proctored, meaning a purchaser is sitting in the room to make sure there's no coercion or discussion between the evaluators. So they have to sign this and know that every one of the evaluators must have this on file by law, state auditor's office requirement, so that they are making an affidavit that they are acting, again, in the best faith of the agency or the entity. So again, it's not some sort of secret, mystical coercion or cabal. It's a pretty standard and open process.
The evaluators do their evaluation. They turn their sheets into the purchaser. The purchaser enters them into the spreadsheet I just showed you. They are checked for formula and data entry accuracy, and then they are tabulated up. That's typically how evaluations work. Any questions on that process? Okay, let's wrap up here. Okay, I talked about the criteria. You need to know what those are because, again, if relevant experience was 20% and methodology was 10, you're probably going to put more emphasis on your 20%. If the price is 60, again, you want to make sure you're competitive. Other methods of evaluation could be your budget and schedule compliance or your financials forms or any litigation history. I just talked about this, what happens when the award or the evaluation process starts. HUB plan's removed, pricing's removed, they sign the statement, evaluation team reviews the proposals, and again, it may or may not be proctored. A ranking is produced, and after the ranking is produced, then the purchaser sends that to me, and I make sure I like what I see there, and I talk with the purchaser, and I say, well, my recommendation is that we approach the program and we say this. We then go down and talk to the program manager or the end user. We say, well, based on here's the tabulation, I think we should interview the top 3 respondents. They typically agree, and then we may do an interview. So that's typically how that happens. Negotiations can be after an interview, and they're typically done with one at a time. However, if an entity asks you for a thing called a BAFO, best and final offer, know that that's usually thrown out to everybody. I don't find that they're very successful because I have found that most people responding to government solicitations have sharpened their pencil pretty well to begin with. And just throwing it out again saying, okay, I didn't like any of your prices, give me another one. They typically don't produce very good results. Negotiation is much more effective. How to score well, again, respond in exact accordance with the requirements. And folks, the first indication of your professional qualifications is the ability to follow instructions. So please, be sure that you fill everything out and turn everything in. And if you have any questions, ask. And again, present your proposal in a logical, organized manner. Clearly label those sections. If the proposal format's not prescribed, organize it to match the sequence of the solicitation and make it complete, concise, and precise. You should clearly define how your company will meet each service requirement and avoid the following. Avoid ambiguous statements, ambiguous jargon, language not clearly defined, and extemporaneous materials that are not requested. Describe the benefits of your product and service. Emphasize the section of your proposal that carries the most weight. And be competitive. Negotiations may include logistics, terms, or timing. Know that negotiation is not value engineering. Value engineering is, oh, all the prices are higher than my budget. We may have to exclude line items 8, 12, and 13 to make that award. That may happen with a government entity. Know that when you're getting in bed with a government entity, it's taxpayer money, and we only have so much money. So if it was a $2 million budget and your price, you're number 1, and you're at 2.2, we may not be able to do those add alternates, or we may ask you to some value engineer some out of your proposal if we can't find the money to meet that budget. Prepare for your negotiation. Always ask for an agenda and interview questions. If that entity doesn't provide you with a format for your interview or your negotiation, ask for it. Well, what do you want to see? What should I propose? What do you want? Are there questions that I should look at beforehand? Typically, they should give that to you ahead of time. We talked about best and final offer. Know that that can be requested before or after negotiations. A lot of purchasers wonder, you mean you can negotiate after a BAFO, best and final offer? Well, it's a best and final offer. I may not like your offer, so I'm going to negotiate with you. Then I guess it's a super best and final offer. I don't know. If the ordering entity asks you for a BAFO, here are your options. You can stand by your original price. You can lower your price with no reduction in your scope, lower your price but also reduce the scope, or offer or modify other terms and conditions. BAFOs typically include the following. You should submit it on your company letterhead, or a lot of people will ask you on a revised proposal form or bid form. Sometimes they will issue another addendum that only you, the awarded vendor, will actually respond to, which is your best and final price. reference the RFP, and it should be signed by the same person that signed your execution of proposal or bid form. The winning supplier is announced when all baffles have been submitted and the evaluation process is complete. Negotiations are done and an award is made by the agency. Debrief. If you don't win an award, you should ask that purchaser for a debrief. What a purchaser is allowed to talk about at that debrief all day long is your submittal. We are not allowed to talk about anybody else's. Typically what I do when a vendor asks for a debrief is I go through, I'll read through your submittal, and I'll look for places where I thought you either didn't answer the question like you should have and you missed out on points, or you could have presented it more logically, or a recommendation on how you can present your services better next time. They're typically for mistakes or omissions. For your qualifications, I mean, I'm not really there to critique your company qualifications, so that's really not typically what it's about. You can, though, after you get your debrief from that purchaser about your submittal, you can certainly ask for the winning submittals so that you can see how they put their proposal together, so maybe you could use that as a template for your next submittal. Okay, I'm going to say this. I never put on here good luck. Well, it's not luck, folks. It's not. Only if it's a tie bid. We talked about that earlier. This is not a bid. It is not luck. You need to describe your services, and in the end, you need to convince the ordering entity that you're the best supplier for the job because you offered your services at a competitive price, defined your capabilities and qualifications through your proposal submittal so that we could determine that you're the best value for award. That's how you win a government proposal. Thank you very much for coming today. I can take some questions if you like. Yes, sir.
For newer companies trying to break in, you don't have 5 years of experience for your company, what relief do you get from that, or what can you do to overcome that initial barrier?
Sure.
To getting into business when you can be fully qualified,
right? Just
like a guy who's been.
The question is, if you're a small firm and you have responding to a bid or a proposal that says you have to have X number of years of minimum experience, but yet as a new firm, you don't have that yet, how can you overcome that barrier? I strongly recommend that you hook up with a prime and you become a subcontractor. We have great success stories at every agency in the state of Texas with small businesses being subcontractors on a larger project. The agency becomes familiar with their work as a sub, then they submit after a couple of years as a prime, and they have won awards as a prime vendor. Now you've gotten the experience, and you've proven your worth as a subcontractor to the agency. So I recommend that you hook up with a prime vendor, either at a pre-proposal conference. The state of Texas also has what's called the Mentor Protege program, where the agency that does the kind of work that your business does, you can call them up and say, hey, I'd like to know about your Mentor Protege program. The hub director at that agency or that city or that university will help you hook up with a prime vendor so that you become like you would be their small business in their pocket. Does that help you?
Not entirely. I mean, in order to be your own person and not necessarily just be with somebody, you could be fully automated, have machines, the insurance, the capital, the know-how, the people in place, and yet you have to wait to get involved in business. I don't understand the fairness.
Yeah, the gentleman persisted saying, yeah, that didn't really help because he thought that you could still, to be your own business person, you could still have all the experience in the machinery or the equipment to do the job, but yet you don't have that minimum. I recommend then, and at our agency, we changed our relevant experience to read. You didn't have to have 5 years or 3 years minimum experience. You had to have that kind of experience either in the company you're in now or total in your professional career. You can certainly ask the agencies to consider changing their requirement to state that, which is, again, that's why we changed it. It's more open to smaller businesses. So changing that requirement to saying not just in that business, you're a new business, that you've had that much experience in other businesses as well to supplement that business. You should ask that agency for that. Know, though, that also the state and the city and universities are very unforgiving. I mean, again, we don't have insurance. We're putting the burden back on you to perform. And the state, purchasing is all about, in all open government or public government, it's about mitigating risk. And that's our job, is to mitigate risk in the awards that we make for the taxpayer money we send, which is why we have those requirements. Again, working with that agency of the business that you do, trying to see that your requirement should maybe be defined or required in a slightly different way so that you can respond, is your best bet there.
Just to say back what you're saying, it's possible for a company, because people have the experience in the industry.
Not just that company.
Not just that, I'm saying a career worth of experience, regardless of where they worked. They're now at this company. That experience could be considered long enough exposure in the business to get on that or get a proposal.
Yes, the clarification was that a person who has life experience, but not in their present company, all of that total experience could be considered. Absolutely. We changed ours to state that at my agency. Many agencies are doing the same. If you're responding to one where it's not worded the way you like, find your single point of contact, write your question and say, would you consider this? And I have found most of them do. Okay. Okay. Thank you all very much. Good luck. No, not luck. Do a good job.
All right, everyone, we do value your feedback, so if you could fill out the yellow forms and turn them to the desk right outside the door.